excited to have we're really excited to have so many amazing events on the schedule, and huge shout out to Erica, Amelia, and many of the Leland team members for coordinating, and all of our amazing coaches that are going to be hosting these different sessions. This session is going to give kind of like an overview of these tests, and we'll dive into a couple of different strategies, but you need to register for all of the individual events this week if you want to get the recordings. If you want to get, we do like, we'll raffle off free slots in the boot camp throughout the week, and other discount codes. So make sure you join live. But even if you can't make one of the sessions, if you register, you'll get the recordings for the next week. So definitely make sure you take advantage of that and fill out this form if you haven't. We've dropped some of these links in the chat, and very excited to have you here. So welcome to GMAT GRE Week 2024. We're going to cover a lot of different topics across, just how to study, and then also specific tactics for the different sections. You're going to have access to some of the best GMAT and GRE coaches and tutors in the world, which, we have a few of them on the panel tonight. We're also going to send out a bunch of free resources and other useful things for you to make sure you're set up for success in the test taking journey. And if you're applying to a master's program or an MBA, and I know there's probably many of you applying to MBA programs, and many more of you who are, or many, I guess, additional folks who are applying to other master's programs, but super excited to be here with you this week. Here's just kind of a quick overview of the schedule. We did drop a link in the chat that lets you register for all of these. So make sure you register for each of them individually, because each individual session will send you a specific calendar hold, and we'll know who's interested in that specific topic. So I think that is most of it. You can definitely drop questions in the chat. We will try to monitor it. Be supportive to everyone on this call. We're all going through the stressful test taking journey. Actually, I'm not, thank the heavens, I'm done with that. But the rest of you are going to be in the thick of it, and we're cheering for you, and we're here for you. If you want to turn your video on, it's always great to see faces, but no worries if you're on the go. Okay, this is kind of the quick overview. We're gonna do some introductions. Most of the time is going to be spent on the expert panel, and then we'll wrap things up at the hour. Maybe we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A, or if not, we'll just kind of answer questions throughout the session. My name is John Colliger. I'm the CEO of Leland. I went to Stanford for my MBA. So also admitted to HBS. I took the GMAT. I probably would have considered the GRE. I didn't know anything about it. And I didn't get the good advice that would have been to consider the GRE. But thankfully it worked out. You'll also see Erica, Amelia, and Josh, and some of the other Leland team members in the chat, sending links, resources, and other helpful things. A lot of work goes into organizing these big free event weeks. So big thank you to Erica and the team for putting this on. Very excited to have so many of you on here. And now I would love to introduce, actually, I'll leave it to them to introduce themselves, but I'm very excited to have Bruce, Marie, and Nick on our panel tonight. Bruce, I'll let you introduce yourself first, and then we'll pass it to Marie and then Nick.
For sure. Hey everyone, I'm Bruce. I got my MBA at Wharton. I also did the GMAT. I've been teaching the GMAT and the GRE for like 10 years. And I've done it both privately. I'm not doing it at Leland, and I also developed curriculum and taught it at UCLA.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marie. I have been in the whole test taking realm, as you see, for 20 years, mostly started with SAT and ACT. I think of myself as a test taking junkie. I never applied to business school. I never ever put that on me, but I just really I love puzzles. It's my thing. And I've been doing this full time now for 8 years. Yeah.
Hey everyone, I'm Nick, and I have not tutored for 20 years, but I did take the GMAT a couple years ago coming out of undergrad, and did pretty well, and have really enjoyed coaching and tutoring along with some of the startup work that I've done since undergrad. So I'm excited to be here with all of you.
Love it. All right. We're at almost 200 people on this call, which is awesome. We would love to hear from you. We're going to talk at you a lot tonight, but we'd love to hear, where are you dialing in from? We'll see who gets the award from the furthest away. Marie is probably starting off the strongest right now, being out in the Azores.
I'm actually in Argentina right now, so.
Sometimes it's the Azores, sometimes it's Argentina. Where are you from, what degree are you applying to? So if MBA or other program, and then what's your dream program? Would love to hear from you if you could drop it in the chat. London School of Economics, Master's in Finance, Paris. All right, we got some international folks there. HBS, Sweden. All right, Sweden's probably the furthest away so far.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, it's getting too fast for me. It's great. Nashville, California, New York, GSB. Okay, a lot of MBA. Makes sense. Zimbabwe. Shout out to folks in Zimbabwe. Even let's see, we got Australia. Love it. All right, I'll let those continue to trickle in, but we'll keep going. It's always fun to see where everyone's coming from. So just to give you a quick overview of Leland, I know many of you have come to Leland events in the past, so hopefully it's not too repetitive. And some of you are probably here for the first time, but we're building the one-stop shop to help you reach the most competitive schools and companies in the world by connecting you with amazing coaches like the folks on this panel, hosting free community events like this one, and then building out a content library that many of our coaches have contributed to called Leland Plus, where you can access sample essays, resumes, videos, and all sorts of other helpful resources. So we're trying to make the world of admissions and career coaching as accessible as possible. We now have over 50 categories on the platform, tens of thousands of customers across the world, as you've seen tonight. And it's been really fun to see this company kind of blow up in the last couple of years. We've been around for just over 2 years. It's been really fun. We've helped so many people reach their goals. We hope you're next. We know that many of the folks on this call will be faces that we share in future events, and it's truly the best part of our job is getting to see the success that many of you will have in reaching your goals. So I also know Marie and Bruce will send us screenshots of their clients celebrating when they reach their test prep goals or they get into schools. It's really fun. We're actually going to start printing them out and putting them on our wall in the office because it's been such a fun part of the process. So we hope to get those congratulatory texts from you as well. And we will send you a congratulatory package. Erica has sent like 1 million DoorDash gift cards, t-shirts, other things. So let us know when you reach your goal. We will celebrate with you. Also, just a quick FYI, we have a big MBA week that's also completely free that starts in June. So if you've not registered for that, we'll drop the link in the chat. That's going to be an awesome event. And then we've mentioned this, but it's not the management consulting interview bootcamp. We do have that coming up. We also have the MBA bootcamp coming up very soon. So we're excited to host a lot of different boot camps to kind of accelerate your journey and make sure you're kind of reaching your goals. So for those of you that are recruiting for consulting, I know there's some of you on this call that are doing that. And for those of you that are applying to top MBA programs, we have those coming up and are excited to kind of accelerate your journey. So make sure you fill out the form if you haven't already to get $200 in GMAT and GRE tutoring discount codes and the chance to win a free MBA bootcamp spot. It'll be a really great event. All right, so let's jump in to the fun part of this, which is the GMAT and the GRE. And we're going to have Bruce just give us a quick overview of kind of the difference between the two. I know many of you, and if you could drop in the chat, like which test you're planning to take, or if you are still undecided, that'd be super helpful for us. But while you're doing that, we'll let Bruce kind of walk through a quick overview of the GMAT and the GRE.
Thanks, Sean. So here's the thing: as many of you know, the GRE and the GMAT are new. The very good news about that for you guys is it's no longer the 4-hour ordeal that it had been forever. These are now more like 2 hours. The other important thing when you're considering the GRE or the GMAT, for those of you not going to business school, but kind of just going to a regular or an other kind of grad school program, you're probably going to end up taking the GRE. If you're going to business schools will accept either the GRE or the GMAT. They tend to be agnostic about that. So you're going to want to take the test that you do the best on. It's been my experience that some students prefer the GRE, some students prefer the GMAT. Understanding what's the right test for you is the most important thing. Don't try and game what the schools are wanting you to do. You do the right test for you that you can do the best on. So for the GRE, there are 5 sections. There are 2 verbal reasoning sections, 2 quant sections, and there is an analytical writing section. And the score range is 260 to 340. The GMAT Focus has 3 sections. It has a verbal reasoning section on it, and the verbal reasoning section on both tests is pretty similar, reading comp and critical reasoning. The big thing about the GRE, vocab. Most people have to learn about 500 to 700 vocab words. That's the deal on the GRE. On the GMAT, the verbal reasoning, there's quantitative reasoning. People tend to find the quantitative reasoning on the GMAT a little bit more conceptual. And on the GRE, sometimes a little bit more straightforward. Some people prefer one, some people prefer the other. And the GMAT also has data insights, which is a lot of like chart reading, graph reading, things like that. And the score ranges between 205 and 805. One important thing about the GMAT, they have taken this time, this redo of their test, to readjust the scores. So it used to be, if you were shooting for that 95th percentile, you would be telling me, Bruce, can you get me a 750 score? Now that 95th percentile on the GMAT is more like around a 675 or so. So that's an important, kind of testing score reset that's happened on the GMAT. The GRE has not had a score reset. That's all I can think of. I think those are the highlights.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Bruce. Super helpful. And we did just hit the 200 marks. It's great to have so many of you on this call. All right, we're going to jump in. It's fun to see in the chat. Like, we do have a few undecided, so this will help you. And then we do have some GMAT and GRE, and we'll definitely, we even have an LSAT in there. We will not talk about the LSAT tonight. That's okay. We're gonna cover other ground. But we do have LSAT tutors on the platform, and we are going to go deep into each of these tests throughout the week. So make sure you register for those specific events. So just to kind of jump into the panel now, and maybe we'll go to you, Marie, to start our panel questions. How should someone start studying for the GMAT or the GRE? What's kind of the process you recommend?
Well, basically, you need to give yourself a lot of time. I would say, I used to say 3 months, but I really feel like it's a 4 to 5 month thing. Right now, if people are looking at round 1, they need to start right now. This is why, I mean, a lot of times people will start right now and they push it off to round 2 because it's hard to, it's something that you have to get a really structured schedule. I think you should be setting yourself to do it two hours a day, 6 days a week. And, with tests built into that. But to say how someone should start, I mean, I would say with the tutor, because a lot of times people kind of do it aimlessly, and then we get the calls that, like they just can't figure out how to streamline things.
Yep. Nick, anything else you'd recommend on preparation or maybe not preparation, like how to get started, what to do first?
Yeah, great question. One that I always recommend is the GMAT mini quiz. This is like the very first thing you do. It's just 9 questions. They've updated it for the GMAT focus. So there's 3 on the quant side, 3 on the verbal side, 3 on data insights. And it's just a great way, especially if you're kind of in that mode where you're thinking through which test to take. It's a good way to get a little taste of the GMAT and just kind of see where you're at. So I'll throw the link to that mini quiz in the chat as well.
That's great. And anything else, Bruce, that you recommend doing when you're just getting started?
Start early.
Yep. Great. All right, we'll jump into some of the specifics here. So as someone kind of evaluates the decision to take one or the other, and Bruce, your overview was super helpful. Who like does better on what's the archetype of someone that does better on the GMAT versus the GRE and vice versa? Maybe we'll go back to you, Bruce, for this one.
I would say I haven't found, like a personality or a background or an academic background kind of, to say, oh, well, this person's probably more likely to like the GMAT or the GRE. I actually encourage everybody, just take a practice test on each and see which they feel more comfortable with. I found that it's very hard for me to predict when I'm working with someone. Some point in the process, I say, look, just take GRE or just take a GMAT, see how you feel about it and see which one you feel more comfortable with. That's been my experience anyway.
Great. Marie, what about you?
It was that was an easier question to answer a year ago, but I think right now the people that I have who want to go for GMAT are people who really, really want a challenge and have said, I'm really, really, really good at tests. and therefore I'm going to go for that. But I have some extremely smart people right now who are just like GRE forever. It's so much easier and it's less to learn. There's less material. So it seems like it's also like a more economical option right now for a lot of my students, because there's less, I mean, when there's one less section to learn, and it's more vocabulary, which is like rote memorization.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can kind of speak to the aggregate level because we see, thousands of students take both on our platform every year. It certainly feels like, I think it depends a lot on, honestly, the country that you're from and, how rigorous has your test taking or quant skills, background been. We obviously see some international test takers do very, very well on the GMAT. And I think that the quant, even for people that say they love math in the US, like it doesn't always translate to being really good at the GMAT. So I think that's a nice way to think about it. If you're looking for a test challenge and you've done well historically on those, I think the GMAT can be a good option. If you're like a smart person who loves math, you might spend less time on the GRE. So it's something to think about. And schools, I think, are increasingly seeing more GRE test takers when they apply. So they just genuinely don't care. All right, let's jump into maybe some specific like study strategies, and we can share a few resources that you like. Maybe we'll go to you, Nick, for this one. How do you think about kind of the approach to studying? Is it sprint for a month? Is it, do a slow drip for a year? And, what are some of the other resources? That mini quiz is super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of your study strategy, there are the number one thing that I would recommend is focusing on, call it the lowest hanging fruit, or the areas that you're weakest. And that requires a baseline. So what I typically recommend to people is early on, you'll spend a few weeks perhaps studying for the exam, and then go take a practice test and figure out, where are you? You need to know where you're strong and where you're weak on the sections on the test so that you can effectively study. Then from there, and often you'll work with a coach like myself, Bruce, or Marie for this, you'll build a study plan to attack those areas specifically. So let's say that you find on the GMAT, for example, that your critical reasoning is kind of a weak point, and the GMAT will actually break down specific question types within critical reasoning that are weak points. You can go, and you should go, and drill those specific types of questions over and over. And what I typically do with my clients is we'll typically establish like a 3-hour a day study schedule. It depends on bandwidth, of course. Some people have more time or less time, but within a 3-hour block, I'll typically do the first hour is your kind of weakest area. So let's say it's let's say it's the bolded critical reasoning questions. Within the boldface, you'll go and do 50 minutes straight of boldface GMAT critical reasoning questions. And then those last 10 minutes, you'll go back and evaluate. You'll look at the ones that you got right, the ones that you missed. You'll take notes and do some self-reflection and share that with me as your coach, and kind of do that again every day. And then, of course, over the rest of those 3 hours, you're hitting other types of questions. And you're going, ultimately, you need to be focusing deep on a specific question type. Is my recommendation in terms of study strategy, rather than just taking practice tests over and over again. Practice tests are helpful marathons or races to work towards, but in your daily study, I highly recommend breaking it down.
That's great. Bruce, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things that are important to note. And the first is just keep in mind as you're going for these elite scores, what your competition is doing is they're studying for about 3 or 4 months, something like that, for about, let's say, somewhere around 15 plus hours a week. So if you're kind of there in that level of commitment and you've got a good academic background, I kind of don't see why you can't do very well on the test, right? But if you're just don't have quite enough time, don't have that time to study, it's a lot harder. right? Because your competition is studying. The other thing that I would say that's just super important is it's really important to keep going day after day after day. There's a certain way of thinking about these problems that builds on each other, and taking, that week or 2 weeks off sometimes can just kill you. So the idea of just, it's like incremental, right? It's exponential. As you study more and more, you get better and better and better. And it gets easier and easier and easier because you just start to learn to think like the test thinks. But that is just, look, the GMAT and GRE work like everything else in this world. The more you practice, the better you get. And the more consistently you practice, the faster you'll get at getting good at it.
Yeah, that's
To
great.
that end, I want to say that I know that I think of it a lot like going to the gym. And if you go to the gym, like say 5 times a week, and then you take like a week off, a 2-week
Pô, eu ia
vacation.
colocar meu lado
Yeah.
fora pra gente ficar gostoso, tá comendo.
Sorry, we muted him. Go for it. It was some feedback. Go for it.
Okay, sorry. I was saying that it's like trying to go back to the gym after 2 weeks off if you like work out really hard and you're like, oh my God, I'm dying. And I just say that because I've had students who take breaks, and it's I mean, I always say, like, if I'm not in your face, that information is like just seeping out of your head all the time. So I want to be always there to sort of, it's a little bit like I'm your conscience, making sure that you're coming back to this and that you've got some, I'm holding people accountable. So I think that's really what a lot of people come to us for, right? I think that's what my students say. I need someone to hold me accountable. I need someone to push me and, sort of guide me through this.
Yeah, Marie, one question that came through in the chat that I think is worth just following up with you, and I know you'll do these like kind of big, and Bruce will both do these like 20 to 50 hour tutoring packages with students to kind of help them end to end. During that time, how many practice tests are they taking? And then in addition to that, like what else are you doing with them as you're kind of working together for that many hours?
When I meet with the student, I show them how I set up my files and exactly what material I have to get into and how much I think each lesson is going to take me. Like my probability lesson takes 2 hours. If I'm doing geometry for GRE, that's going to take 4 hours. So it's sort of showing like all these things. And I really feel like everyone has to, like math, maybe not, some people say it's not linear, but for me, I really have to set a really strong foundation of arithmetic and basic algebra principles before I move into word problems, things like that, so that they're faster at computational skills. So I think that my lessons are very, especially in the beginning, I feel like I'm just sort of like spewing a lot of information. There's always this back and forth of me checking and giving them questions so that I can make sure that they're like with me on this. It's an interactive thing always, and that's how I kind of gauge where they are. But as far as the tests, I make a joke that I only really give them tests when I start thinking they're getting a little too confident, because then I need them to get like like sucker punched, because I just think that they're doing what, and that's really when I start doing them. But a lot of times I just have so much, I'm assigning so much homework, and sometimes they build up more towards the end. It depends on the student really, but like if I have a student who's really nerding it up and doing everything they're supposed to, I'm probably not giving them a test until halfway through, and then I make them halfway through, like until I've gone through halfway of the content. And then I start
Mm-hmm.
doing them more towards the end. And sometimes it'll be like 2-3 weeks. Now that they're 2 hours, it's easier,
Yeah.
to assign a couple a week.
Yeah, that's great. Bruce, what about you? How's it different or the same?
To kind of pull back the curtain here, and for me, this is the important strategic insight about both of these tests is this. With the exception of the vocabulary on the GRE, darn near everything on these tests are stuff you learned pretty much by freshman year in high school. Nobody's going to ask you to do a differential equation. No one's going to ask you to analyze Moby Dick. But these tests are hard. So what drives the difficulty? Why are they hard, right? Well, at some point, you got to know your stuff, right? You got to know your exponent rules. You got to know how to pull out a conclusion. You got to know your vocabulary. But that's not enough to post an elite score. The tests get very hard, not because of what they're asking. Again, the material is very basic, how they ask the questions. And at some point, you have to transition from, I already know all my high school math and English, to I now need to know how to get that knowledge to score me points on the test. And that's a transition from studying the material to studying the questions. And that is the big thing. And there are a couple ways you can. You can do that on your own. You can analyze thousands and thousands of GMAT and GRE questions, which I'm sure like all of us have done, right? Or we can say, look, Nick, when you were talking about, question types, that just, what is that question type? I think all three of us know exactly what that means, but that can be very deceiving, right? Is that just doing probability questions? No, there are some very important things that you need to pull out of the question itself to determine what kind of question you're actually in. And that's where we help, right? That's where we say, okay, you see this marker in this question? This is actually asking you to do this, which might not be immediately obvious. And it's actually telling you that the test wants you to do it in these ways. Literally, the steps that it wants you to take are kind of encoded in the question, but you need some help interpreting the questions. That's where the elite scores are, because you're not going to outscore somebody because they didn't know the probability formula and you did, right? At some point, everybody knows all this stuff. It's how fast and how accurately can you interpret those questions, go quickly and go accurately through them. That's what separates people out at the high levels.
Yeah, that's great. Nick, anything you'd add? Maybe specifically like how many practice tests do you typically see people take before they get the score that they want?
That's a great question. And I love to encourage people to take multiple at-bats of the actual exam, because frankly, there is a universe of potential scores that you can achieve. And your goal is to get it. Let's say that you took 100 GMAT tests. You're going to find some bell curve. You're going to have an average that you score. But guess what? You can take the highest score you get. You can take the high outlier. But what that requires is for you to start to piece together the bell curve to some extent. And so I typically encourage people to take at least 3 official GMATs. And so across that, often I'll kind of start again with a practice test. And then close to the first GMAT, I'll encourage clients to take 1 or 2 more practice tests. Then going into the second one, let's assume you have enough time, you're ahead of the game, you're spacing them a month out, which is often what I recommend across those 3 tests. Maybe 2 weeks before that second test, you're taking another one. 2 weeks before the final test, you're taking another one. And using those practice tests, again, for me, that's almost like I'm a runner. I love training for races. You're doing all of these individual drills and practice questions to then prep for a practice exam and then an official exam. And that's what you're working toward.
Yeah, it's great. Okay. We'll keep going. So we talked about practice tests. I think I'm gonna skip this one. Let's talk about the in-person versus online, now that that's an option. Any recommendations you have? I'll open it up to any of you three. What have you learned from this, and any recommendations?
Everybody's different.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I'm much more of I would rather be in person. A couple of years ago, when this all started with COVID, there were so many mistakes with online, people freaking out. But it's gotten better. But I get all kinds of weird complaints, like a student saying, then he went like this, and the proctor would be like, pick your head up. And it kept, freaking him out. But I think everyone's different. Like, I like being in an uncomfortable environment. It gets my adrenaline going. Meaning, like, I think I wouldn't do well if I did it at home. But everyone's different, I've noticed, so.
Yeah, Bruce, Nick, anything else you'd say?
It used to be a horror stories, right? When they first started this, computers would glitch, the proctors were wildly, kind of inconsistent. It's gotten a lot better if you take it online. I still hear the occasional horror story. Just had a student go through one where, she's all ready to take the test. It was 45 minutes until they created a environment that the proctor was comfortable with. And it's like, so now, and she was literally moving around furniture, right? And she's like, you know what? All I want to do, I was keyed up for the test. I was ready to take the test. And now I'm, hauling my desk around and putting paper over windows and stuff. And it was difficult. I want to stress that those types of, kind of situations are much less frequent now, but it still can happen. And I think that in an environment where you're already trying to control many times the uncontrollable. And Nick, I think you had a great, point about there going to be a variety of performance levels in your tests. If you can feel comfortable going to a test center, it's going to be a more controlled environment for some folks, though that really freaks them out, and it's worth doing it in person. So I would say it's getting better, but still occasionally there are some, there's some not great kind of stories coming out of the in-person.
Yeah, we've one of my clients actually that I helped with their MBA applications this spring was had a similar situation where like the internet started to get it, go out of whack, and they were on campus, so it's like there's not that much they can control. And then they have the whole setup thing can be kind of a pain. So up to you. I think if you have an in-person option nearby, it can be nice to go somewhere and kind of feel that adrenaline as Marie mentioned.
I would say,
okay.
just point, can we just make sure that you time it so that you have 3? Okay, time backwards. Like think about, you're going to take your last one this day, and then you need to, to schedule 3 weeks before for your second one, and you need 3 weeks before that for your first one.
That's great advice. So, one option, you have 6 weeks, you take one at the beginning, and you take one at the end, and take one in the middle. That's really, really helpful as students start to kind of work backwards. And ideally, as you think about it in the context of a broader application, it is very nice to like get it out of the way and then move into essays and all the other stuff. So many of you will be taking the test the day before the applications due, but if you can avoid it, as has been mentioned, or start early. Okay, let's talk through kind of just common mistakes. Maybe Nick, will go to you, like as you've worked with clients. What are some of the mistakes that you see students make? And then we'll open it up to Bruce and Marie.
I think one of the mistakes I see people make the most is going through the test linearly, chronologically, top to bottom. That's how we're taught to do it. And that's often how we think is, you'll read the question, read the answers, and then start thinking through things. In many cases, and this depends on the type of question, as Bruce mentioned, there's so much nuance with different types of questions, but there are different orders that are optimal for given questions. For example, with the critical reasoning questions, I never read the passage first. I will read the question first, which is the second thing, and I will based on the question categorize what type of is this a strengthen the argument? Is this a weaken the argument? Is this a boldface? What have you? And then I'll read the passage. And having that context, knowing what I'm looking for, is so helpful. Just that small nuance of not reading top to bottom in that specific example makes a huge difference. And there's so many different types of questions where the order in which you do things matters a lot. And that's something I would recommend thinking about with a coach.
Yeah. Marie, anything that you'd add in terms of mistakes that you see folks make either in the test or as they prepare?
I think like Bruce and I are probably like thinking the same thing, but I think what gives me so much anxiety is when students are like, I'm going to do this maybe like once a week, and then right before the exam for a month, I'm going to cram. And I'm like, no, we cram now. We cram every minute of every single, we're cramming until we get there. So it's better to go like top heavy and start now, immediately now, because there is never enough time. And I think that I had stress. I think seniors do this the most with the deferred or enrollment, but I really felt like I had a lot of I had stress rashes in February and March from students who did not understand the urgency, or just didn't realize that they were really not prepared enough until too late. And you can't really say I told you so, but that's the thing that just, it makes me a little bit sick, because people who get who apply for round 1 can push off to round 2 and can do it the next year, but deferred enrollment and that kind of thing. So you have to think that you just have to start immediately, and you have to, change your entire lifestyle. It's a lot to really push the score to where you want to, when I'm looking at where everyone wants to go. But it happens, just do what we say,
The number one thing, stay off the internet. Just, you know, because here's the thing, because here's what ends up happening. First of all, everyone's lying. Nobody's telling the truth on the internet. The other thing is, even if somebody's sincerely sharing something that helped them, it might not help you at all. And here's actually the practical kind of consequence that I see a lot is people start, because everyone wants to talk about these super hard questions or whatever that they, you know, that they saw, that they were able to solve. What it does is people start spending about 90% of their time studying for about 1% of a question that rarely shows up on the test. And they just skew this because, you know, I promise, three of us are not going to give you bad advice. Like we have studied these tests top to bottom. When we tell you that, you know, yeah, I'll show you how this works, but the chances of you seeing this aren't very high, and I don't want you spending a lot of time here when your ratios still need a lot of work, right? You know, it's like we're not lying to you, and the overwhelming just, you know, impact of the internet is everywhere. It's everywhere. Everybody's telling, they're so definitive about it. Just what it does, I found it undermines confidence a lot. It tends to pull focus from where people actually need to study, and I found that it tends to depress people's scores. So I know it's hard, but try not to, you know, hang out on all the internet chat rooms and in Reddit and everything.
Yeah,
Someone once told me the 3 people they worked with got 770s or above, and I'm like, they're lying. Okay,
Yeah,
they're lying. That's not happening. And you know, not 3 people you work with. I mean, unless, you know, I mean, it's like the probability of that. I mean, let's try to calculate that, you guys. Probability of 3 people 770s at the same job is, well, it's very, very low.
it's true. Yeah, everybody on the internet got a 770, and because they got a 770, they're working really, really, you know, kind of high-powered jobs, which gives them a lot of time to post on the internet. I mean, it's like it doesn't kind of like hold together, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the mistakes that I feel like I made was trying to solve every problem, and I feel like this was evidenced by when I first started studying for the GMAT. I took a test, and I think I got a 680. And I was like, oh, that's okay. Like I'm in the ballpark. And then I took a test like 2 weeks later and I got a 660. I was like, dang it. I've been studying every day for 2 weeks and I got worse. And it was because I'd now learned how to solve like the problems versus the 680. I was like, I don't know how to solve that. I'll just move on. And then I had more time to nail the problems that I really knew how to solve. So I feel like kind of being strategic about this is the question that I probably could solve. It might take me a long time, but so I'm going to kind of work backwards and solve it in maybe a probabilistic way where I now narrow it down to 2, make the best guess and move on versus like, all right, I'm going to take 5 minutes on these questions. And then my last 5 questions of the section, I'm just be guessing on because I don't have the time to finish it. So anyways, that was just my own personal experience. This is kind of a meaty question, and we are going to go deeper into each of these throughout the week. So it's hard to kind of, you know, spend too much time on them. But I think just, you know, out of curiosity, I'd love to hear, are there any like specific strategies for a certain question type or a certain part of the test that you kind of give as a teaser for like how someone might think about solving you know, this type of verbal problem or this type of quant problem? I think it's just helpful for people to get a sense for like, oh, here's like a strategy that exists and I, you know, hadn't heard of it before. Any thoughts? I'll kind of open it up to any that comes to mind from the 3 of you.
One quick kind of easy thought to share on the reading comprehension of the GMAT. The way that I often encourage people to categorize questions, and again, like focusing on the question here, is between passage level, paragraph level, or phrase level. You'll look at the question and quickly make a determination. Is this about the whole passage? Is it asking what is the tone? Is it about the paragraph? And sometimes it'll even point to in the 3rd paragraph. Or it'll discuss a subject that's only contained in 1 paragraph. Or perhaps does it say when the author uses the word X? That's a phrase level question. And each of those question types you should think about differently. A passage level question, I often encourage people, don't go back and read the passage. If you don't know the tone already after reading the passage once, you're not gonna, you know, you're probably better off spending time thinking about the passage rather than, you know, diving into the details there. Where a phrase level question, I encourage people, okay, if it says line 31, go back and read lines 30 to 35, or at least skim, and help give yourself some context there. So even just kind of breaking down different types of questions is an easy way to make some quick gains on question types like that.
That's great. Bruce, Marie, any other strategies you can tease? I know
it's hard, such a meaty question. There is something, and this is just how standardized tests operate, but it's really important. When you're reading, and this is not just reading in the verbal, this is also when you're reading math, if there's any words in the math at all, you have to read hyper literally. Now, in the math, that literally means that many words have direct math translations, and you're not worrying about where the problem is going. You're not worried. All you're trying to do is get this question out of English where it doesn't do you any good, right? Can't do anything with it. So, subtract 2 semicolons and a comma. I don't know what to do, right? As long as it's English, you can't do anything. But as soon as you get this thing into math, what you're going to find is the equation is going to be very simple. Because again, it's going to be simple algebra because those are the tools that they have to use on the test, right? That's it. On the reading, it's the same thing. It's this hyper literal reading anytime they're words. So that means on reading comp, if it's in the passage in black and white for every single answer choice, you should be able to go back and read and point to where the passage actually says that. Sometimes on inferences, right? You got to, take a couple pieces of information that's in the passage, but it will be there. Making assumptions, especially on the verbal section, kills you, right? Maybe the author is talking about garbage in the ocean. Is the author saying that's a bad thing, or is the author simply saying this is how garbage ends up in the ocean? That is critical. And if the author doesn't say that's bad, you know for sure they're going to say, what's the primary person of this passage? Well, garbage in the ocean is bad. Author never said that. Author never said that. And it's also, and again, the same in the quant. Be absolutely as literal as you can anytime you see words on one of these tests.
That's great. Super interesting. Marie, anything else you'd add on this?
I don't know. I always say, like, a lot of times my students go in automatic pilot mode and always want to solve for X when the question's not necessarily asking for X. And I always, I do questions with students, and I'm like, you just got to throw yourself into it. But at some point you want to reflect and go, how is like the super smartest person maybe doing this in under 45 seconds? And I was going back and forth with a student the other day, like helping him with like homework. And he's like, I did it this way. I'm like, yeah, I did it that way too the first time, but let me find the cute way. And then I showed him what I thought was like the cute, the way that it kind of should have been done. So I always try to show my students that, like, when you're like, oh, like, that was the trick, or like, did I almost miss it? Did I almost get fooled? And if you feel like you didn't go, ooh, I almost got fooled, then you probably got fooled. So there's like a little bit of, like, you got to get like the rhythm of how they're built so that you don't fall into the trap,
Yeah. That's great. Those are really good tips. And I know this is a tough question when they're the context of each type. We could probably spend a lot of time talking about any of them. I have had a couple pings on how to work with these coaches. I just had Erica drop their coach profiles in the chat. You can actually schedule free intro calls with them to see how you might work with them. Definitely do that. They're going to fill up. They're very in-demand coaches. So definitely encourage you to get on that, and you can chat with them for free. So why not get to know them and see how you might work together. Let's shift gears to the test day tips and tricks. I know you shouldn't shotgun a Red Bull before walking into the testing center, but anything else that maybe you should. I don't know. If you're used to doing that for a practice test, maybe you should. But would love to hear what are some of your best test day tips and tricks. Maybe we'll go back to you, Bruce, and then to Nick and Marie.
This is, first of all, this got a lot easier when these things were 4 hours. It's like, well, you're going to want to pack a lunch, and you're going to want to carb load before because you're going to be there forever, right? So this has gotten easier. As for me, I'll be quite honest. I suffer from both depression and anxiety. So I walk into this test center, and I got some stuff I've got to manage, and my guess is there's some other folks out there that might need to manage the same kind of stuff. There are a couple things that I do that are proven by science to help. And one is, I won't get into why all this works, but one is very simple. In between questions, if I'm starting to feel the anxiety build, two things I'll do: right hand, left hand with my pencil. A big deal. It switches your polarity in the brain. The other thing is, if you breathe out for just a little longer than you breathe in for about 3 times, that tends to suppress your fight and flight kind of responses, tends to settle most people down a little bit. And the other trick I'll share is this. When I start to go, I'll start to do this a little bit. Also, for some reason, just because we're human, tends to suppress that fight and flight kind of reaction. Those kinds of things tend to work for me. Don't know if they work for other people, but you can also try them out in practice tests too, and see if that helps you.
Love it. That's great. You just had everyone breathing out for longer than they breathed in.
Don't pass out. It's a little bit.
Nick, anything you do on test day or recommend your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, it goes without saying, like eating healthy, sleeping well. But I encourage people to get there early. If you're in person or if you're, online, prepare early. You don't want to introduce any element of unnecessary rush. Be as prepared as possible. Give yourself tons of time. Just feel like you're drowning in time, because once the test starts, you won't be. But feel, it's before the test, just get there an hour early. Just hang out, enjoy it. You want to just minimize as much as possible of any type of rush on the day of.
That's great. Marie?
Well, I like this breathing one, but I have to say that, but I've always told my students to dress up nicely and to do power stances. But the dressing up nicely thing is, I feel like, if you feel like you look good, you'll feel good, and then you'll do well. Okay, but I like to say do good. But I mean, like, I'm not saying like, be uncomfortable, but sort of like, and then I really do tell people, like, like, do power stances. I know it's like, I mean, of like those Beyonce, like Wonder Woman stances. And I don't know, I tell my students, be cocky, walk in there and be like, I'm definitely the smartest person in this room. And then if you don't feel that way, I always go, well, you got the best tutor, so trust me, you'll be fine. And I think I mean, like nothing works like a lot of practice. But I've also always said that something that Bruce is saying, like, I also suffer from depression and anxiety. And when I take a test, I'm not like this. I'm like freaking out. But that anxiety sort of makes me go fast. So I've always been like, anxiety is not the worst. The worst are people who are too chill. Okay, people who are really chill when you're teaching them, they give me anxiety because I'm like, you need to rush a little bit more. So don't think that it like looks like when we're doing it, that it's just everything's going so smoothly. It doesn't. It actually is like my heart is beating in my chest, but I don't know, works out. So,
I think it's helpful just to know that even the best like tutors in the world that always do tests, like that anxiety can be normal and can be channeled, and that's super helpful. Okay, I think we only have a couple of questions left. I'm going to skip. We talked about the anxiety thing, so let's talk about managing time, which is obviously like a huge component here. We'll just have Bruce answer this one, and then we'll go to the next one. But we'd love to hear thoughts on managing time.
I'm going to be real quick, and I'd love to hear other people. Part of it is just practice, almost like you have a 2-minute clock in your head. You're just doing it so much. Like musicians, they can count out 8 beats. They don't even have to think about it anymore. I want you having a 2-minute clock. You don't even have to, you just know where you are in that 2-minute clock.
I love it. Marie?
I don't know. I think that everything's been discussed. I don't have any new information. Sorry.
All right. I know we're wrapping up. I think maybe the last question I'd love to, we're diving into the final tips and any sort of like success stories that you've seen. Would love to hear, like, for these people that are listening to this, many of them are, coming at this stressed about the test and want to do well. would love to hear any like success stories and kind of like final tips that you have for them as they kind of start their test taking journey. Marie, I'll start with you. I know you have success stories. I always see them on your Instagram. They're my
I
favorite.
have success stories. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say about them. My success stories are really great. I used to always say to my students, like, you know, I think one of the things is sometimes when people are last minute, which drives me crazy, but sometimes people are like, can you think we can do this in 4 weeks? And I'm like, or they've said last, but I just don't want to encourage that. And I'm like, I don't know, you know, like I used to be like, miracles can happen, but I'm like, miracles, when I say miracles, I'm talking about anyone who's doing this in less than 3 weeks with no studying. That seems like a miracle when someone's trying to go up like 80 points or something. But miracles have happened like 50% of the time with me. And I sometimes I can't predict them. So I don't ever tell people no. Because I'm not, you know, I used to just be like, no, that's unrealistic. And I've kind of realized that sometimes things aren't. But here's my final tip. Start now. That's really what I would tell every single person. Are you preparing this for 2 years? Start now. Okay. I don't like I have met people who've been like, I've been studying for this on and off for 3 years. And I know what that means. They started like 2 years ago and they only got so far, they stopped. And then they bought another program and they stopped. And a lot of times they've spent like $1,500 on one program, $1,500 on another program. And then you have to be like, now I have to talk you into like buying something that's going to cost like $6,500. But, you know, just try. I mean, like, we're here for these talks and I give advice that's honest, you know? So, I mean, if someone's like really motivated, I can tell you how to, you know, be more self-sufficient. But it probably sometimes helps to have someone to sort of hold you accountable.
Yeah. Bruce, what about you? Any success stories and final tips?
Here's the thing. If you've got, you know, if you're motivated, if you want to do well on this test, if you're willing to stick with it, and boy, it is sometimes not very much fun to stick with. If you're willing to do that, it's been my experience that darn near anybody can score very, very well on the test. Stick with it. Everybody is going to go through a point where your score doesn't go up, right? Where you just felt like you're stuck. Stick with it. This works like everything else in life. Just keep practicing. Practice the right way. Get some professional help to help you make sure you're practicing the right way, however much you need. But if you're stuck, you can get going in the right direction. And if you're willing to do it, you can do it. There are very, very, very few folks who just don't get there. Just keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. The big difference between people who get there and don't, or the people who expect to get there and the people who don't. That's it.
Go. Yeah.
Yeah. Nick, bring us home. Any final success stories or thoughts?
Absolutely. I think my final kind of big tip is have a formula for every question. You should go into every single question knowing exactly how you're going to approach it. And I remember I had a client a few months ago who I spent hours with him kind of going through all the question types. He was really good on quant, not so good on verbal. This was back in the GMAT Classic. And I went through a bunch of verbal frameworks and gave him rules and formulas for each of the questions. And him simply practicing that and implementing it got him from a 700 to a 750 really quickly. And it's the power of approaching a question with that type of framework. And coaches like myself, and especially Bruce and Marie, we've seen all of these questions so many times. There's very specific formulas and frameworks that you should use to approach these questions, and we want to share them with you. And so definitely get that professional help, put in the reps to know the types of questions that you're up against, and have a formula or an approach to hit on each of those types of questions.
That's awesome. Thank you guys. This was amazing. Can we give a shout out, show some love in the chat for these coaches? It's so helpful. They also have included some discount codes that we'll include in a follow-up email, but you can also write them down for money off of their packages. And just I can't like speak highly enough of these two, and Nick, of course. Nick's incredible. We Nick's actually on the Leland team now. We loved him so much. So we love all three. They're great. Can't say enough good things about all of them. Make sure you jot these down and take advantage of them. I'm already seeing a bunch of intro call messages popping through. So definitely reach out to these coaches, and very excited to support you on this journey. Whether you're, taking the test now or just getting started, get going. You can set up a call with our team. You can get going on coaching. You can get going on tutoring. We'd love to help you. We've dropped our link in the chat. We'll follow it up with an email. And we do also, we have a giveaway winner, right? Is that something that we have available now? Maybe we don't. Let me follow up. Let me just triple check. I'm supposed to get a ping from the team. If we don't have it, we will follow up. Oh, it looks like we're still figuring it out. Okay, we'll shoot you an email if you won. If you have not filled out that form, though, make sure you do it so that you can enter the giveaway that we are going to have tonight and later this week. So this is great. And as I mentioned, we have MBA week coming up soon, and the application boot camp, the MBA application boot camp. We have early bird pricing going on right now. I'm actually, I will be leading one of the sessions. We have former admissions officers at all the top programs, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, all leading sessions in this application bootcamp. It's going to be excellent. So don't miss out on that. And it's going to be a great way for you to get started on your application. We'll give you a discount to actually get $100 off even this early bird price this week for those of you that filled out that form. So sorry, I know there's a lot of logistics. This was the first session. We're going to go deep in a lot of different question types and parts of the application, parts of the test throughout this week. So make sure you tune in. And thanks again, Bruce and Marie and Nick, for joining us tonight. It was great to have you, and good to be with all of you. Good luck with your tests and your applications.
Good luck, everyone.